let's define inflation. It sounds like everyone knows what inflation is. Actually, no. If you're talking about consumer prices, and that is the definition I use because that's the definition the Federal Reserve uses. And if you're trying to forecast policy, maybe you can disagree with them, but if you're thinking differently than they are, then you're not going to know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing, but you need to know what they're doing. So they look at consumer prices. There are 10 different measures. There's the CPI, the CPI core, something called PCE, personal consumption expenditure deflator. We don't have to get too about that. There are 10 different measures, but they're all about prices you pay for stuff. So milk and bread at the store, gasoline at the pump, medical costs, tuition, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I mean by inflation. That's what the Federal Reserve thinks. Now, there is this Austrian School of Economics, and they say they count asset prices as inflation. So stock prices, Bitcoin for that matter, gold, silver, land, et cetera. And they say, look, that's inflation. The stock market's at an all-time high, et cetera. Well, that's not my definition. Now, if you count asset price inflation increases as inflation, then we're sort of talking past each other. Now, I do agree that there are bubbles. I think the stock market's a bubble. I think other bubbles are forming. I certainly think Bitcoin's a bubble. But that's not, and it's kind of, if you want to call it inflation, that's fine. But if we're going to have the debate, I'm talking about consumer prices. Now, when you talk about consumer prices, there is no inflation. It doesn't exist. And immediately someone says, well, I just fill up my car with gas and it was, $3.50. It used to be $2.20. Okay, you're right. But the price of technology, the price of computers, the price of tuition, the price of a lot of things, price of clothing, et cetera, have all come down and continue to come down. So all these indices, they're baskets. It's like, well, you spend a certain amount on clothes, a certain amount on computers, iPhones, tuition, et cetera. And they look at the basket. There's no inflation in the basket. There just isn't. If you want to pick a particular thing, gasoline at the pump is a good one. Yeah, okay, I get it. I put gas in my car, but there's no inflation. There's selective perception. People pick one thing, and again, gas at the pump is real. I mean, like I said, I put gas in my car, and if that's all you're thinking about, but that's not an index. That's one good. Tuition prices are dropping. Healthcare prices are dropping. Clothing prices are dropping. Technology prices are dropping, et cetera. And people ignore all those things like they deserve it, like it's a gift, and focus on the one or two things that are going up. I mean, I'm not making it up to you. I mean, look at the indices. Go to the Department of Commerce in the United States and look at the Bureau of Economic Affairs and look at their PC core deflator or CPI. They're all going, they're either down or flat. They're not going up. What happened in the second quarter of 2020? The U.S. economy went down 31%. It was the greatest drop since, greatest quarterly drop on an annualized basis in history. And for the year, it was the greatest drop since 1946. So when you have an economy like that, and then you come into 2021, when they measure inflation, what are they actually saying? Well, they have the basket of goods and services, but they're looking at it either month over month, or they're looking at a month year over year. So they're comparing, for example, April 2021 to April 2020. So a monthly data series on a year over year basis. If that's your comparison, yeah, inflation is going to go up, but that's only because the bottom fell out last year. You have to look at the base, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, I fell in a 50-foot hole. I climbed out 10 feet. I'm still 40 feet in the hole. So yeah, so what he was saying is that in the coming months, you're going to see some upticks in some of those indices. That's true, but that's in comparison with the worst year since 1946. And so that's to be expected. My question is, where are we in the fourth quarter? Where are we in early 2022 rather, when the economy was recovering? For that matter, it recovered in the third quarter of 2020. Those base effects are going to go away. So he's talking about 3 months. The reason is not because prices are skyrocketing. It's because we're comparing it to a collapse. I think it's significant. I think it's, it's not a fraud, but it's kind of a cover up. Look, first of all, those numbers are skyrocketing. M2 in particular is off the charts. It's going up by tens of trillions. So I tend to look at base money, and I understand that base money is not the money you spend. That's what the Fed creates when they buy government securities from primary dealers, and the dealers, which are banks, just give it back to the Fed. So, you're a bank and I'm the Fed, and I buy a bunch of treasury notes from you, and I send you the money out of thin air, and you take the money and give it back to me as part of your reserve position. Well, that money didn't help the economy. It went back and forth between us. So the accounting entries, I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but that's not, there's no velocity behind that money at all. Now, M1, that's the money that the banks create when they, you apply for a mortgage and they go, okay, your mortgage is approved, here's the money. They just put it in your account. Again, it comes out of thin air. That kind of money can result in inflation, but it's not. And the reason it's not is because people are saving it. I mean, I looked at my bank account the other day, and there was $1,400 in the IRS. I said, "What's this?" It was my handout check from Joe Biden. I don't think I'm entitled to one, but I got one. Maybe I am. I haven't really focused on it. But I'm not going to spend it. I'm not running out today saying, "Hey, I'm having drinks on me." I'm just leaving it in the bank, and that's what people are doing. They're saving it. Or they're paying down debt. But when you pay down debt, it's the same as saving. You're shrinking your balance sheet. But what you're not doing is spending it. And that's the key. You can print all the money you want. They have printed all the money they want. But it's not being loaned, it's not being lent, it's not being spent. And therefore, there's no velocity, and we're not getting the economic growth. The key to inflation is velocity, and velocity is psychological. Velocity is not something the Fed can control. They probably wish they could, but they can't. Yeah. They can control base money to like 2 decimal places. They can stick the landing, make base money whatever they want, but they can't make you spend it. They can't make me spend it if we don't want to. If people, if you just the broader population, if somebody lost their job, they're not spending money. They're saving every penny they can because they gotta pay the rent or whatever. Okay, what if you didn't lose your job? Well, you might be worried that you will. Like maybe you're next, or maybe your company's shutting down next week. People are just saving the money. It's in the data. I want to make it clear, Danielle.
Yeah.
This is not Jim's hypothesis. This is what the data says. If I have critics, I say, don't yell at me. Go look at the data and then get back to me. But I always say the IMF is transparently non-transparent. And what I mean by that is they issue press releases and have press conferences, and they tell you what you're doing. You can go to the website, but nobody understands it. It's all jargon. It's highly technical. So it's like whatever. So let's just talk about what an SDR is. It's not strawberry daiquiri on the rocks. It's a special drawing right. Okay, what is a special drawing right? It's world money. Well, why don't they call it world money? Because they don't want you to think that that's what they're doing. So the Federal Reserve. By the way, why don't we call it the Central Bank of the United States? It's because Americans hate central banks, but we have one. It's called the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is a printing press. They can print dollars. The European Central Bank has a printing press. They can print euros. The IMF has a printing press also. They can print SDRs. They can print these special drawing rights. They are world money, and they're handed out to the members. Like you and I can't go to the ATM and get some SDRs, but if you're a country who's a member of the IMF, you will get some. And they come out of thin air. It's the same way the Fed creates dollars, the same way the ECB creates euros. And they just hand them out. And by the way, they're not new. They were created in 1969 at a time when there was perceived to be a shortage of reserves, a shortage of liquidity. It was a way to create liquidity out of thin air. That's all money printing ever is.